Whenever I build a group or an online course or anything or something in person, I'm always like, how can I incorporate these 6 elements into it? So it's almost a bit of my checklist that I go through. So here are the 6 elements. I'll just list them and then I'll go through them one by one. They are community, continued connections, your grief does not define you, treat yourself as your best friend, don't compare, and count your wins. So the first thing is about community. You know, we grieve as a tribe. We need our grief witnessed. We're not meant to be islands of grief. And the people we think will get it, like our friends and family, often are the ones who don't get it or want us to move on or get over it. So community is such an important aspect. And that actually, I was so surprised, translates online. You can have an online community. The second element is continued connections. You know, years ago in psychology, there was almost this thought of you had to complete or close that relationship with your loved one who died. And now we're seeing that actually isn't the healthiest thing to do, that a continued connection, continuing bonds with those who have died is so important and is actually quite healthy and normal. And I always say, don't give death any more power than it already has. Death has the power to end a physical life, but not to end our love and not to end a relationship. The next one is your grief does not define you. To try to also think about who is grieving, who is the person doing the grief work, feeling those feelings, who is the person in pain. You know, so many times people will say, well, I don't want to be a widow. I don't like that term widow. It's not all that I am. I'm still connected to my husband or my wife and things like that. So many times we allow the grief to sort of become who we are rather than what we're experiencing. And the fourth one is treat yourself as your best friend. Our self-talk is so horrible in grief. It's shocking that a moment when we could use our most compassionate voice in our head, those old protection voices often say the cruelest things to us. You know, no wonder they died, or people are always leaving you, or it's your fault. And what if instead of being your worst enemy, you treated yourself as your best friend? The fifth one is don't compare. You know, the problem with comparing is if you win, you lose. The other thing is you don't have a broken head, you have a broken heart. And when you're comparing, you've left your heart and you're in your head. And you're really sort of going through whose grief is worse. And my answer to whenever anyone asks me whose grief is worse, my response is always yours. Your grief is the worst grief. And the last one, 6, is count your wins. You know, there was a big push to sort of find gratitude in grief. I think gratitude in grief can be a huge stretch. So I often talk about, especially in the first year, just count your wins. I mean, showering might be a win. Getting to work might be a win. Trying to eat a little healthy might be a win. Taking a walk might be a win. So all those little wins, to sort of maybe count them rather than trying to go for gratitude.